Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Today I'm bringing you some brand new Star Wars Battlefront 2 footage I recorded at EA Play, and also some first impressions of the game. So far I've only done one video on Star Wars Battlefront 2, and that was when I was actually at EA Play, and I would have liked to have done more, but I lost my voice when I was over there, and I just couldn't really do any commentary because it just sounded absolutely terrible. And a lot of you guys have been asking me where's my impressions of the game, like what do I think of it, is it good, bad, is this actually a decent sequel to the first game? And I've not wrote a script for this one because I wanted it to be off the cuff. I've just got a few mental notes about everything that I wanted to talk about. So just for your information, I played the game at EA Play for around 4 hours or so. I want to say 4 hours on this map, Theed, on the same game mode, and I switched several times between the Separatists, which are the droids, and the clones. So I thought a good place to start with the game would be the class system. So very different from the first Battlefront game that DICE made, the game now has a 4-class system in the game. We've got Assault, Heavy, Officer and Specialist. They are the 4 main trooper classes, and when you start a game, that's really all you'll be able to spawn in as until you start to accrue battle points, which is the new currency system in the game. So immediately the class system is adding a lot more depth to the game because the classes are quite different to each other, and more importantly they have different skills and also health and damage stats. So it looks like that we've got class specific weapons and also abilities here. And everything that I talk about in this video is of course work in progress, and this is only based off my EA Play impressions of the game. DICE said that this particular build of the game at the event, everything was turned up to 11 and the balance was all over the place. So the assault class is kind of your all-rounder. They get your standard blaster or a blaster that was kind of like an SMG. You had the option to choose between 2 for each class in this build of the game. And they also got star cards like the Barrage, which is the grenade launcher that fires 3 projectiles, or the standard thermal detonator, along with a scattergun which they could pull out, and when you get that thing out it makes you run a bit faster. The assault class had 150 health. Next up is the Heavy, and they carry a much heavier blaster, obviously. Heavies actually had 200 health points, so a bit more than the assault class, and they had the ability to turn their blaster into kind of like a minigun mode where you would walk very slowly but you'd be able to put down a lot of fire. Now as well as this, they had an ability which was a shield, a personal shield that only kind of covers your head and torso, and it's got a limited amount of damage. And that thing was very effective at popping it and then pushing towards your enemy because you can shoot while you've got it on. The problem with it though was that people quickly figured out that it was really good and it had a lot of hit points. So you would just find like a head glitch, or you would crouch and you could shoot people with impunity and they couldn't really do much damage to you. So the Heavy class was cool. Moving on, we've got the Officer, and the Officer is very much a support role in this game. You've got a turret that you can put down, and I think it can be upgraded. In the first game you couldn't move the turrets around, but now you can just hold E, pick it up and put it somewhere else. But if I'm correct, I think that it will upgrade if it gets lots of kills and stays alive for longer. I think I heard that somewhere, but I could be completely wrong with that. The Officer also gets a buff ability, so if there's teammates around you, you will buff them. It gives you like a little percentage of health, and I think you also get more points for kind of rallying your troops. In terms of blasters, they had access to pistol-sized blasters that were semi-automatic and didn't put out as much damage, but if you played carefully, you could actually kill people with them. Similarly to the assault class, the Officer class had 150 health points. And then finally we've got the Specialist, and this is basically the sniper class of the game. The first game didn't really have a sniper class because everyone was just one class and you would tweak it using the star cards, I suppose. But the Specialist in Battlefront 2 is definitely the sniper class. The weapons that you have access to are sniper-like blasters, they've got big zooms on them, and they do a load of damage if you hit people in the head. In terms of abilities, they could equip a secondary kind of SMG weapon for a while, and they had this infiltrator ability from what I remember, where if you popped it, it would take you off the radar, I think, and it would also reveal enemies' locations that were nearby to you. You also got a disruptor with that class, and if you use that when you're nearby enemies, it would actually disable their blasters. The Specialist class only had 100 HP. So that's a quick rundown of the 4 basic trooper classes in the game, and I'm happy to say that they all feel quite different from each other. In this build of the game, the weapons were class based. I'm not sure if there's going to be all class weapons in the final game. I don't know, you'll have to ask a dice dev. And you certainly fit into a specific role when you're playing a certain class, and like I said, immediately that's added a bunch of depth into the game. And of course, with the star card system in the game now, you've got different levels of star cards and you can customize them and choose exactly how you want your specific trooper class to act. Do you want to be more damage? Do you want to be a bit more tanky? Do you want a certain ability to have a bit more range? That kind of thing. And I think that leads me nicely onto the new battle point system. Now I will have a separate sponsored video where I just talk about the battle point system, so I'm just going to do a quick rundown of it. Basically, as you play the game, get kills, play the objective, support your teammates, just be a good player. You're going to build up battle points and you'll see how many you've got when you die in the spawn screen, and then you can actually select to come in as an upgraded unit on the battlefield. Now that could be anything from a tank to a starfighter to a B2 battle droid to a clone jump trooper to a hero if you've got enough points to spend. So if you remember in the first game, all of that stuff, all the vehicles, all the heroes, all the cool pickups, they were all just circle discs on the battlefield that you would just happen to run across. If you wanted to get an ATST, you'd have to find an ATST pickup, AT-AT, X-Wing, TIE Fighter. If you want to play as a hero, you guys know exactly how that worked, and that whole system has gone now, although there will still be some pickups on the battlefield like rocket launchers or objective things like ion disruptors, which you use to take stuff out, but they're not as obvious as they were in the first game, and most of the pickup stuff has now moved to the battle point system. So say I've built up 2,000 battle points in the spawn menu, I could then decide to spawn in as a B2 battle droid, and this guy's got a bit more health, he's got a wrist rocket, watch out for those wrist rockets, he's got an upgraded blaster, and he looks a bit cooler. Or on the clone side, you've got the clone jump trooper, still costs 2,000. He's got a jetpack. I don't know if you noticed that, but jetpacks are now gone from star cards as far as I'm aware. So they're not going to be the meta of the game where everyone just picks a jetpack, because it's clearly one of the best things to have. And the clone jump trooper has a rocket launcher as well. That class was actually really OP in the build of the game that I played. Of course, you can spend the battle points on heroes or vehicles like the AT-RT or the hover tank. I didn't get to use these much. The tank, to be honest, on this level was a bit underwhelming because, of course, you can't take it into the palace, so after the first section it just becomes a bit boring to use. Tanks, I think, are really going to come into their own on the bigger battlefield style levels that we're inevitably going to get in the game. Can you imagine a tank class on the original Hoth from the first Battlefront, tank versus tank combat on that? Definitely something that would interest me. So that gives you a rough idea of how the battle point system works, and also just a footnote about heroes as well. I will go into more depth in heroes a bit later on. When you're playing as a hero, you don't accrue battle points, so that means that no one can hog a hero for the entire game, unless of course they're very good with them and just never ever die. So it's a very simple system. I'm sure you guys all understand. You've played many multiplayer games before where you have a point system that's similar to this. But again, this battle point system instantly adds more depth and tactics into the game. You get to choose how and when you want to spend your battle points, what units you want to come in as. Maybe you want to save them up for a hero or something like a specific starfighter. It's definitely an interesting system that's been implemented into the game. You'll be rewarded for playing well. The good players who just want to go after kills will score points that way, and the objective guys will score points that way. So gone is the random horrible pickup system from the first game. That's the classes and the battle point system briefly covered. And I wanted to move on to more specific things now, because I know that that's exactly what you guys want to know about. So let's first move to the starfighters and how they handle compared to the first game. The starfighters also kind of have classes in the way that the troopers do. You've got all-rounders, you've got bombers, you've got fast attack vehicles, and they feel completely different to the first game. Criterion are a separate developer studio actually specifically working on the Starfighter content in Battlefront 2, and you can tell. In the first game, they felt extremely casual and arcadey. It was just like you were flying a mouse cursor around. All of the maneuvers were on set keys, so loopy loops, all the aerial maneuvers were on separate keys. And you could also hold right click when you had a target in your sight and it would lock on and do the shooting for you. There was not much skill to it at all, and I personally really disliked the Starfighter Combat in the first game, and I avoided using them as much as I possibly could. In the new game, however, you've got full control now. It's kind of like flying in Battlefield 1. You can roll, you can do loop-the-loops all by yourself on the joystick, on the mouse. Complete freedom there to do maneuvers by yourself. The speed system is in the game too, so if you slow down, you do more damage. If you're faster, you do less damage, but also you're a harder target. And most importantly, the lock-on system that was in the first game has gone now. No longer does it lock on for you and just do all the work for you. You can't just hold mouse 1 now. You actually have to aim. If you look on the screen when you're fighting another target, you do get the prediction crosshair there, so you see where you need to aim to hit them based on how you're moving and they're moving, but you can't lock onto them there anymore. So all of the aiming in the Starfighter Combat has to be done by you, and that's instantly more interesting. And of course the Starfighters have abilities just like the classes do. There are lock-on missiles which kind of take a while to lock on, and then you can fire the missile, but those can also be dodged by a skilled pilot if they're fast enough and do a maneuver at the right second. I really enjoyed using the Starfighters in this build of the game. Being able to maneuver everywhere by yourself was great. I didn't feel like I was restricted like I was in the first game, and you could be very, very effective at destroying targets that were on the ground, whether that's just infantry, heroes, or even the tanks on the ground. I think perhaps it was a bit too easy to take out the ground targets. So DICE are definitely going to have a hard time balancing the air versus infantry combat, I think, but I'm sure that will all come down the line. The main problem though in respect to that, I think, was that we had a very limited number of weapons and star cards to equip, and there wasn't really anything as an infantry player to deal with starfighters apart from getting enough points to spawn into your own starfighter and try and take them out. There's going to be way more options when the full game releases, and also we weren't really focusing on shooting things in the sky. We were just enjoying the game and having a bit of fun on the ground, so it wasn't really a big priority taking out air vehicles. So Starfighters in the new game, they get a big thumbs up from me. Next we're going to talk about gunplay, and this was a big point of contention for people in the first game. The gunplay in Battlefront 2 is still very accessible and not that different from the first game on the surface. There is slightly more recoil and spread on the blasters, and there are a few specific changes which we'll get into now. The most important change though, in my opinion, is that there's actually a difference now between hip firing and right clicking or holding the left trigger if you're playing on console to aim down the sight or do a zoom in. Now in the first game, if my memory serves me correct, there was no difference between hip fire and aiming, and that meant that you could just play in third person all of the time, hold mouse 1, jump around like a bunny rabbit and just get a load of kills. And that made the gunplay feel very unsatisfying and easy. And the difference in the new game is quite clear, as you can see here. I demonstrated just on a wall here with just hip firing in first person and then right clicking, and you can see there's quite a clear difference there between the recoil and the spread. I wasn't trying to control any of the recoil there at all. I was literally just holding mouse 1 both of those times, so you can see big difference. What about in third person? Is there a difference there too? Yes, as you can see, there is a difference in third person between just hip firing and aiming or zooming and firing. Now, does that mean there's a difference between first person and third person? Because a lot of people thought that there really wasn't any point in playing in first person apart from the graphics looking nice, because you can't do third person wall peeking if you're playing in first person, obviously, so you get a smaller field of view and it gives you a big disadvantage. But I confirmed this with a number of developers in Battlefront 2. There is no difference at the moment between first and third person in terms of accuracy, recoil or spread. And I think that's going to disappoint a few people, because a lot of people want to enjoy this game in first person and not feel like they're at a disadvantage. But I think the reality is that Battlefront is a third person game with the option to play in first person if you want to. That's the way I see it anyway. So overall for gunplay, I think it needs to be a bit more satisfying, especially when you're playing in first person. And that's a mix of animations, sound design, the feel, the recoil on the blasters. And I'm sure that DICE will look into improving that as the game ramps up towards launch. Interestingly as well, crouching as well as zooming, like I mentioned, will lower the recoil and dispersion of the blaster, and the projectile speed in the game is faster. Third person camping around corners and walls still exists. It's going to happen a lot in the new game, and that's going to put some people off for sure. But it's definitely more difficult to consistently hit people in this game. The time to kill feels much longer, and holding mouse 1 and hip firing isn't going to be anywhere near as accurate as actually aiming at someone and shooting them. It just won't be anywhere near as effective as it was in the first game, and that's another thing that adds more skill and depth to the game. Next, we're moving on to heroes, obviously a massive part of Star Wars and the Battlefront games. In this build at EA Play, the Separatists had Darth Maul and Boba Fett, and the clones had Han Solo and Rey. And just to kick the elephant out of the room, I don't really care that they've got cross-era heroes in this game. It doesn't bother me at all that I can play as Rey in a Clone Wars era, and for me it's all about fun. And I'm really looking forward to playing a game mode like Heroes and Villains, where you've got heroes and villains from across all of the eras of Star Wars going against each other and testing their strengths and weaknesses. I think there's something incredibly unique about that. DICE did say, however, that they still don't know if they're going to stick with the cross-era stuff, so time will tell if in the final game this will even be the case. As I said, it's about fun for me. I don't care about cross-era inaccuracies. It's a video game after all. So the heroes in this build cost 5,000 battle points for you to spawn in as. And really the only ones I cared about were Darth Maul and Rey, because they've got lightsabers and they're two new heroes in the game. Why would you ever want to pick Han Solo when you can play as Rey? And also, why would you pick Boba when you can play as Darth Maul? On this map in particular, the lightsaber heroes were just absolutely dominant and so much fun to play. Like, they've completely nailed Darth Maul. The look, the animation, his abilities. He has 3 rushes before they're on cooldown where he spins towards the enemies with the lightsaber. He's got a vertical lightsaber throw which just looks absolutely incredible. I love the fact that that's different to the Vader lightsaber throw where he throws it horizontal. And he's also got the choke and push, which is just so much fun. I cannot express how good it is to play as Darth Maul in Star Wars Battlefront 2. Whether you're a Star Wars fan or not, it's just so damn satisfying. Rey had a couple of interesting abilities as well. She had a charge, which was a bit underwhelming, but the other two she had was, one of them was a wall hack where you can see through the walls, and the other one, which is really interesting, is a mind trick. And if you use it on a group of people, it actually inverts their controls, and trust me, you do not get used to this. If Rey hits you with a mind trick, you feel like your game is broken or your mind in real life is broken. Like, hey, I'm pressing left, but I'm going right. I'm pressing forward, but I'm going backwards. It's incredible. It's really fun to use and mess with people. And it's great to see that kind of fourth dimension stuff making its way into a Star Wars Battlefront game. In general, the heroes now felt a bit weaker than they are in the first DICE Star Wars Battlefront. They can now regenerate health, so I think they're supposed to be used as more of a objective pushing device where you strike, take out a load of enemies, push a particular objective, fall back, regain your health, and then go again. Because what you would find in the first DICE Battlefront game is that if Luke Skywalker got to like 5 health points, you didn't regenerate health. So he would just become Luke Skywalker that camps behind a rock, or Boba Fett that sits 500 meters back trying to snipe people. And you don't really want to encourage that kind of gameplay, because after all, these are heroes and villains after all, and you want them to be a big component of the game. You want to be rallying behind them and seeing them push into battle and have a big effect, rather than just hiding behind a rock because they're low HP. So in general, I feel like the damage of them has been slightly reduced, and also the health, but because they can regenerate health, the players that are really good with them and practice are going to have an absolute blast with these heroes. They are so much fun to play as, and I can't wait to see, considering that this is all Star Wars eras, what heroes we're going to get in the game. My only concern with the heroes and the way the new battle point system is, the first thing is that if you've got enough points to buy a hero, 5,000 battle points, you'll find that you'll just wait on the spawn screen, clicking Darth Maul or Rey repeatedly until the person that's playing them dies in the game. And that, of course, is very boring. You don't have to do that. You could just spawn back into the game as like a B2 battle droid or a normal trooper and try and accrue some more points. But then, of course, by the time that hero dies, someone else may have got him because you were alive, or the round has simply ended. So I think that's going to be a point of frustration for people. And also, after a certain point in the game, there's always going to be a select number of players who have 5,000 battle points. So you're always going to see heroes and villains in the game. Is that going to be a problem? I don't know yet, and I think we'll have to wait and see when the game releases. But one thing I did like about the hero system in the first Battlefront game is that the heroes weren't there all of the time, and you got some nice breaks in between where you could just do that infantry combat and not have to worry about fighting an overpowered hero. And the third thing that I just remembered, by design, I think the lightsaber and the force users are just going to be way better than a hero that's got a blaster, for example. So I think that DICE should look at either rebalancing it a bit more, or perhaps having it so blaster heroes or non-force user heroes actually cost slightly less battle points than the more powerful heroes. So let's say, for example, Han Solo might be 4,000 battle points, but Luke Skywalker would be 5,000. Inevitably, DICE are going to have a very hard time balancing all of these heroes and villains. Finally, for heroes, there's also more depth here as well. Because of the star card system, you can customize the way that your heroes work. Do you want to add more range to Maul's lightsaber throw? Do you want to add a bigger area of effect to his force choke and push, for example? Do you want to make him a bit more tanky? Do you want his base lightsaber to do a bit more damage? So the game is going to have star card customization even for the hero characters in the game, which I think is a fantastic feature. So unlike the first game, all of the heroes and villains aren't going to be cutouts in exactly the way DICE intended them to be. And as a player, you'll have the ability to be the hero that you want to be and suit your specific playstyle. Now, I'm going to start wrapping this up as quickly as I can because I've just gone over the 21-minute mark. And I think I've covered most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about and the stuff that you guys would want to know about. There's a few things that go without saying, really, like the graphics, just wow. I mean, this was played in 1440p at max graphics. The game looks absolutely incredible. The level of detail, the cutscenes when the game starts, the birds on the ground, the droids roaming around everywhere, the civilians running away screaming when the game starts. The visuals, the sound design is phenomenal. What else do you expect from DICE? As always, they're pushing the boundary in terms of how a game can look and sound, let alone a 40-player multiplayer game, which is incredibly impressive. It's the most Star Wars video game that I've ever seen. Another great announcement, which I'm sure surprised everyone in the gaming industry, is that Star Wars Battlefront 2 will not have a season pass at all, and all of the content that's added to the game after launch, so that includes heroes, maps, game modes, weapons, everything that's going to be added to the game will be completely free. So all the customer will pay is the base price of the game, and everything else after that will be completely free. There will be microtransactions. We don't know exactly what they're going to be, but it's kind of obvious. I think it's going to be stuff like upgraded star cards, weapon shortcuts, skins maybe, those kind of things. But I am so happy that DICE and EA have finally stepped up to the plate and in one of their AAA games not included a season pass or a premium model. I think that is absolutely huge, and it means that finally a Battlefront or Battlefield game isn't going to have a split player base the second a new map or DLC releases. And a positive offshoot of that is that the longevity of the game will just be so much more bigger. Hopefully this is the start of a trend for EA games and the next Battlefield game follows suit. Star Wars Battlefront 2 will have dedicated servers, but no word on a server browser yet. I personally do not think that we're going to get a server browser in this game, although I would like to still be able to set up a custom game. Something that wasn't in this build of the game was the gun customization or the blaster customization. There will be blaster customization in the game, but exactly what that is, we don't know yet. The game has a dynamic squad system in it, so if I'm about to respawn and other players are respawning with me, you'll actually see them pop up on the deploy screen and you'll be spawned in together as a squad. Now on the minimap, you'll see your squad members as yellow dots, and if you stick near them, you'll get bonus points for playing together and teamwork. Now this is cool, and I think it's good that they've implemented a dynamic squad system like this, but I don't really think it had a big impact on people actually working together and playing as a team. From what I experienced, this game suffers from something that I think the first game suffered, that advanced team play is really devoid. There's not much team play here rather than just buffing your teammates or pushing together in a room with them. And I think that's quite sad. And what I'd love to see is an actual proper squad system in the game now. Now that they've put classes in, I think it makes sense. Have a proper squad system in the game where I can team up with my friends and I can always see them on the HUD or on the minimap. I can play the objectives with them. I can call tactics. I can coordinate. The game would massively benefit from a squad system like that. The dynamic stuff at the moment, it just doesn't do enough in my opinion to encourage that kind of team play, and that's a big letdown for me. One other concern I have, which was a big problem with the first Battlefront game that DICE made, is the amount of explosive spam. The barrage is still there, the thermal detonators are still there, rocket launchers are still there on the special troopers. There's going to be a lot of explosives in the game yet again, as well as proximity bombs and things that you can detonate. And it's just really nice to get some breathing room from all of that explosive spam and just concentrate on the gunplay and infantry on infantry tactics. And I'm a bit worried that, as with all DICE games it seems, when they release them, there's just explosives everywhere, and then 6 months later they really tone it down and the gameplay, in my opinion, is much better. I'm hoping that they don't go that route with this game and they actually tone it back before the game is released. And it's particularly a problem on this map because after you push down the main street and get the troop transport up to the front of the palace, you go up the palace stairs and then the map kind of dissolves into 3 choke points where people just spam grenades. Eventually one team gets through, captures a point, captures the other point, and then you just end up fighting over this one round cylindrical throne room. There's grenades everywhere, explosives, and it's just completely chaotic. So on this level, I'd have loved to seen more flanking routes, more levels when you get into the palace, and also, like I said, just tone down the explosives, please. I think these type of games are just way more enjoyable when you're not dodging explosives all of the time. That's a preference for me. I understand some people really enjoy the explosives, but in my opinion, it gets to a point where it's ridiculous. And I think that's about everything that I wanted to talk about and discuss here. DICE and EA have said that this game will have 3 times the amount of content that the first Star Wars Battlefront game had when it launched, and that is music to my ears. I'm really looking forward to bigger, more open maps where you can experiment with the vehicle play and the classes. And I feel like this is the game that Star Wars Battlefront should have been. In my opinion, it feels like a nice cross between Star Wars and Battlefield. It's much more like the original Battlefront games too. I was very concerned that this was just going to be the first game with a few additions, but after playing it for 4 hours, I feel like DICE have done enough here to make this feel like a different game. We haven't even seen the single player gameplay yet. It sounds really cool. They've actually got a canon single player that takes place between the end of Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. Really looking forward to that. Motive are developing that separately, and then the space battles, we've not really seen any gameplay of that either. Criterion are doing that, so I'm hoping that that's really advanced from the first game. Instead of just having TDM in space, we've actually got Imperial ships coming in, Star Destroyers, transports, all sorts of objectives, and games that last much longer than just 7 minutes flying around blasting each other. Fingers crossed that that's the direction the space battles in multiplayer are taking. So overall, based on this first impression at EA Play, definitely positive from me. If I could summarise my major gripes with the game, I'd love to see more refined gunplay that took a little more skill to use. There's still a big team play element missing from the game, so I hope that DICE do more to reinforce that and introduce a proper squad system. Explosive spam and level design definitely needs to be looked at here as well, and I think balancing all of these heroes will be pretty tricky. There we have it, guys. That's my coverage and first impressions of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think, having seen all of the gameplay on YouTube now? Were you lucky enough to actually get to play the game at EA Play yourself? If you enjoyed this video, please give a thumbs up because it does take a very long time to put something like this together. I'd appreciate that a lot, thank you. And if you didn't like it, hit that dislike button. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. Subscribe for more and I'll see you in the next one.